Hello everyone, Andrew Martin here, and welcome to this chess-based DVD on the Veresov opening. Now the Veresov begins with the following moves. White plays d4, black plays knight f6, white goes knight c3, blocking the c-pawn. White knows this. Black plays d5, and now the characteristic move, bishop g5. Now the Veresov system is very much a grey area in the repertoire of many black players. It's regarded as solid, responsible, but not especially dangerous. And when an opening has that reputation, my impression is that a lot of players don't give it a great deal of serious attention. I think that's the best way to put it. So against that climate as a background, welcome to this DVD, where I hope to show that Veresov is very much alive, well, and is as dangerous as ever. I mean, what has White done wrong? He's simply taking the centre and developing his pieces to start off with. This will be a particularly useful opening for those players who don't have an enormous amount of time to study chess, but at the same time they want to get good results and to incorporate dynamic openings into their repertoire. I think the Veresov's basically an excellent system. It should be used more often. I remember my first introduction to the Veresov was back in the 1970s, reading some articles in Chess magazine at that time, where games of Lev Albert were being described. Albert used to use the Veresov as a winning weapon back then, and he was virtually the only grandmaster doing so. But his game showed that there is a lot more to this opening than meets the eye. And I'm going to feature as kind of inspiration one of his games to start off with. And it's a game, amazingly, from 2013, where he's white against Alexandra Kosteniuk, one of the best female players in the world. And this game was played in Rockville. And it's a graphic demonstration of what can happen when black knows something, but not everything against this particular opening. And Kosteniuk continued with what is considered to be one of black's best moves, knight bd7. Basically, with this move, black stops white from doubling his pawns. Bishop takes f6, doubles the black pawns. Black stops it. Albert played knight f3, which I recall was his favourite move back in the 1970s and 1980s. He sticks with his favourites. And Kosteniuk gives the bishop a nudge with h6. Well, white now has a choice. Bishop takes f6 is senseless now that white's not able to double black's pawns. So it's a question of where you put your bishop. Albert decided on that particular day to play bishop f4, and already this sets up the idea of knight to b5, which if black allowed it would actually win the game in this particular position. So that's why c6 is played, just shutting that idea down. e3 by white, and now black starts to get very ambitious, playing in a over-aggressive manner. What should black play? Well, I think black should probably think about modest ideas such as g6, or if you don't like that, you could think about developing the black queen, either to b6 or a5. What Kosteniuk does is to mount an immediate attack against the white position, which is slightly too aggressive at this early stage. The initial idea in the Veresov is that it's very easy for white to develop the minor pieces, but after that, what do you do with the major pieces? Well, we're going to tackle that idea a bit later down the line. But let us understand that this play by black is a bit too ambitious at this point. White doesn't even need to think about his major pieces just yet. This move, bishop e5, is awkward enough for black to meet. The trouble with black's position is that she's actually put her pawns in the firing line for white. So h4 coming up is going to probe at those pawns and give white an advantage. Already there's a slight problem, you know. What are you going to do in this position? You don't really want to play rook g8. So Kosteniuk goes through with her idea of hoovering off the dark square bishop and then bringing the knight back to f6, whereupon Albert jabs at the pawn structure with h4. So already we've seen that Albert has been successful. He's taken one of the strongest female players completely out of her comfort zone, out of the book, into not unknown territory, but certainly a very unfamiliar position from the opening. Black, I think, correctly plays rook g8, and now Albert hastens to open the h-file. Rook takes g5. Well, again, that looks slightly dubious. I mean, I presume that black's idea is that as she's got a dark square bishop in this position, it shouldn't be too difficult to protect the pawn on h6. But one gains the impression that black is very uncomfortable with this particular situation. Clearly, black could consider taking back with the h-pawn, but there white enjoys uninterrupted control of the h-file, and, well, I presume the simple move like bishop d3 cements a nice initiative for white in this particular situation. So she doesn't like that. She plays rook takes g5, and now the queen comes out to f3, which is quite a common location for the white queen in the Veresov. In this case, white's trying to put pressure on black's position, and she's anticipating a move like bishop f5, after which maybe bishop d3, and then black's got to exchange. White has quite a bit of pressure in this position. Not only does he have the better middle game prospects, the end game, a long way off, admittedly, is not going to be much fun for black with the isolated h-pawn on a half-open file as well. So, going back to queen f3, Kosteniuk plays bishop e6, white plays bishop d3 anyway, and now queen up to d6. Well, black's going to cast on the queen side, that is clear. White goes rook h4, black plays queen b4, and white easily deals with the threat to b2 by castling long, and black does likewise. And now another very characteristic move in the Veresov, g4. That's a cramping move. Black is being denied the opportunity to liquidate this weak pawn on h6. Not only that, white's cementing a grip on the king side, gains a bit of space, and maybe thinks about ideas such as doubling up, or possibly moving the bishop into f5, maybe even manoeuvring this knight around to the king side via e2 and up to f4, something like that. All in all, white has much the better prospects in this position because he's got more choices of middle game plans. Kosteniuk just moves her king. Queen g3 sets up discovered check threats. That probably forces black's queen to go back. And now f4, gaining more space. Well, Albert obviously has got everything he could possibly have hoped for out of the opening phase of the game. He's putting the pressure on. Black is going backwards. And queen to f3 just steps out of tactics on the g-file. Knight to e4. Well, black is getting desperate. It really is as simple as that. She's getting really, really cramped. White is threatening pawn up to f5, which immediately wins a pawn, I think, because the bishop is decoyed away from the protection of the pawn on f7. She can't see what to do. She's been outplayed. She sacrifices a pawn, but there's no way that black has enough compensation for the pawn here, and white correctly, I think, takes on e4 with the bishop first, and then the knight. Kosteniuk keeps the tactics going with bishop d5. Albert's seen his way through it. This is a counter-sacrifice here for the time being. Knight takes d6, bishop takes f3, and now knight takes f7. Bishop takes d1, knight takes d8, bishop to g7, and yes, black has two bishops in this position, but is losing pawns left, right and centre. And so knight d takes c6 gains yet another pawn here, as white is ready to take on d1. So I think Kosteniuk could basically resign this position. I mean, she's 3 pawns down for no compensation whatsoever. She's got 4 isolated pawns. There's no way to gain even a single pawn back. It wouldn't be out of place to resign. She plays on for a couple more moves, but the result is absolutely inevitable, as Albert is even able to garner yet another pawn here with knight takes h6. Black resigned. So there we are, a very recent game where white makes mincemeat of a really strong opponent. Throughout the game, I gained the impression that Kosteniuk was not ready for that Veresov, was not prepared for it, and crashed to a crushing defeat.